Most people use statistics like a drunk man uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. Andrew Lang, Scottish poet, novelist, and literary critic. All right. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. It's been a while since I took a look at bills. I like to do bill reviews. And initially, I saw here in Florida that there's a bill that's kind of gaining some momentum, HB1. It's unclear to me whether or not it's going to pass just yet, but it's HB1, social media use for minors. You might have heard about it. And I was like, oh, you know what? I guess, when I saw the pop up in my Twitter feed, I was like, well, maybe I should do a bill review on this. And as I was reading the bill, I was like, man, this bill sounds familiar. And then I realized I already did a bill review on this one. So if you're curious about Florida and the social media use for minors bill, then check out episode 255, Florida Republicans versus free speech. Basically, the summary of that is that, in my opinion, Republicans are trying to limit social media, but in doing so, they're going to try to limit social media for minors, but in doing so, they will encroach upon free speech for everyone. So good bill, not good bill. I mean, good bill review. But so I was like, well, what should I do now? And scrolling through Twitter some more, and a friend of mine happened to be posting about a bill over in Colorado. You probably know Forrest Mommy. She lives in Colorado. She ran for, it was like, I don't know if it was quite city council. I think it was the seat was titled differently, but it's basically the same thing. Um, and so she was talking about this bill, HB 24, 2017, the Bill of Rights for Foster Youth. That seems interesting. And so I started reading through it. And if you know me, if you've watched this show, you will you know that one of my biggest objections to bills is the basis for the bill. Okay. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm a short guy, and let's say that I determine that there's some injustice for short people. And so I petition my representative and say, hey, would you craft a bill that deals with this injustice for short people? And then my representative goes and does all their homework, and, or they have their aides do it, because, representatives don't really do their homework. They don't really read the bills. Um, and so then they determine that 50% of short people have this issue, like I do. So then they go, and then let's say some tall person comes along and they review the data, and they're like, dude, this data, this 50% of short people was based on a study of 50 people, right? Like that hardly is representative of all short people. And like, we don't really know if this is actually really a problem, right? And so these kind of details are what aggravate me about bill reviews, or about bills in general. And I think to date, and I don't remember which two, but to date, I've done somewhere like 30 bill reviews, and I think there's been two that I could support too. And I'm pretty sure both of them. I think I do remember which one of them was. I think it was Thomas Massey. This is the old. This is, both of them are old bills, and he advanced a bill or crafted a bill that would shut down the Department of Education at the federal level, and it was a one-page bill. In fact, I think the whole bill was like less than a paragraph long. And then I believe it was Senator Rand Paul who had a Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, and that would have, at the federal level, uh, prevented funds from going to cities and states that had no knock raids in place. So it was just a way to say, all right, if you're going to have a no knock raid, then you're going to get limited funding. So, because they can't force you to, I mean, they could technically pass legislation that says no knock raids anywhere in the United States, or they could just use the power of the purse. And so those two bills are like the only bills that I've ever really come out and said, I support these bills. Every other bill I've usually had a problem with, even if maybe there was an underlying cause there that I thought was of value. Sometimes I just think that maybe legislation is not really the go-to answer. So we're going to do a bill review today on HB HB 2017, the Bill of Rights for Foster Youth, and this is coming out of Colorado.
But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, little clip there. I like that. Probably need to update it because my producer, he's gotten a little bigger since that video. So maybe I'll update that. We'll see. All right, so let's get to it. What do we got here? Let's what do we want to start with first? Let's start with a media clip. Let's see what some of the media. So I've got two media clips here. And the number one, it comes from 9 News out of Colorado, and they're talking about this bill. And as I was doing my research and just kind of reviewing the bill, and then reading like what news or organizations are saying about the bill, there was a particular thing that stuck out, a particular statistic, and I was like, that's interesting. So I let's see what we find.
Democrats' bill to protect the rights of kids in foster care advanced in a debate today at the state capitol as they fought over pronouns and freedom of religion. At issue essentially is what happens if an LGBTQ kid ends up getting placed in a conservative foster family. Democrats want to create a Bill of Rights for kids in foster care, put it in writing that, among other things, that every child is entitled to, quote, a safe, loving, and affirming foster care placement, regardless of the child or youth's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Republicans said protecting those rights would discriminate against conservative Christian foster parents. They went so far as to cite far-right anti-trans groups like Gays Against Groomers. The legislation noted that almost a third of youth in foster care these days identify as LGBTQ. Republicans don't have the votes to stop anything at the Capitol unless Democrats are divided over the issue. And in fact, the bill did advance today.
All right. So 1/3 of LGBTQ, I'm sorry, 1/3 of foster children identify as LGBTQ. That's interesting, right? That seems like a lot. So is that true? Well, first, before we dive into whether it's true or not, let's make sure that it's not just this one person saying it. Okay. We want to make sure that if we're going to argue against a bill on the basis of some information, that this information is kind of predominant, right? You don't want to, like, if one news outlet says, oh, 30%, and like nobody else is talking about it, and the bill doesn't seem to rely on that statistic, then arguing against that particular statistic seems to me kind of pointless, right? Like, that's not really the basis for it, nor is it what other people are basing their support on a bill for. So we want to be careful. Like, when we evaluate a bill, at a lay level, I'm not a lawyer. When we evaluate a bill, we want to make sure we do it well. Okay, so let's look at this other clip here. And this other clip is Representative Tatone, I believe is the name. And this is a transgender representative in Colorado arguing, like this was like about a month ago, and they were in session and they were kind of giving their perspective on why we should have why this bill should be passed. Okay. And so this is in legislative session. It's not a very long video. It's only like, just under 2 minutes. And I'll link to everything as I always do. So you can go and see the full everything, because I do shorten things for the concern of time. So let's see what Representative Tatone had to say about this bill.
Rep. Tatone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to first say thank you to all the people out there who do foster. It is a really great need and a great service to kids who need it. And these kids are not looking for parents. They are looking for someone to give them a roof over their head, to care for them, to guide them, and give them a temporary place. It's not being a parent.
So I'm not really sure. This is not what we're not going to focus on, that particular part there where like that's not what kids are looking for. I don't, I mean, was there a survey done? I don't really know. I had some stats, and I don't really want to get into, get bogged down in a whole bunch of numbers and stuff like that. But there seems to be like some high percentage of children who go from foster to being adopted. So clearly a good portion of those kids are looking for a home, because many of these kids have been pulled out of homes for which, the home life wasn't good for them, period. Right? Regardless of, gender or any kind of identity, they just had a bad home. Maybe the parents were crazy abusive. Maybe, one of the parents or two of the parents, were doing hardcore drugs and just neglecting the kids, whatever the case may be, abuse, sexual abuse, there's all these different reasons for which, okay, that home is no longer good for you. Okay. And so therefore we're pulling you out. Like, this is the government will pull you out, and then they're going to try to find you a good home where you're not going to have that experience. So I'm already disagreeing with Rep. Tatone here, because Tatone, not two-tone, Tatone, because I'm not sure that's actually true. But anyway, that's just a side point.
I am actually going through the training to become a foster parent myself. And the biggest reason for that is because of trans kids, because there's a lot of trans kids in the system that don't have a place that they can go that they feel safe. And that's just the reality. I mean, if you were...
Okay, so again, I'm not going to belabor this point too much. The big reason that Representative Tatone is getting into this is because of trans kids. And so it kind of like, I know a lot of people will go, oh yeah, it's because he wants them kids. I don't think we need to go there. Honestly, I think there's better arguments here to be had. And one of them is, you didn't care about foster kids until the issue of trans kids came up, right? Like, you didn't want to be a foster kid parent before that. It wasn't until you heard about trans kids, and then you're like, oh, well, for my group, because Representative Tatone is trans member themselves. And I'm like, I have a problem when somebody all of a sudden wants to get involved into something just because now it affects them, right? And we have to be careful with this, because a lot of people, when it hits close to home, that's when they get motivated. But here's the thing, and I'm going to show it to you in a moment. Colorado seems to be wrestling with issues regarding the foster care system for years now. There's tons of bills regarding foster care, and I'm going to show them to you in just a moment here. Okay. So the idea that, oh, now we're going to get into being a foster parent because, it hits kind of close to home in this particular situation, it kind of leads me like, is this really earned? Like, do you actually care about foster, like the whole of foster kids? And then I think it also plays a role in this 30% statistic that we're about to evaluate here in just a moment. Because if you get into fostering because of trans kids, because that's something that's close to home to you, which is fair, but it's built on a statistic that may be dubious, then are you really helping? Right? That's my big question. And then that's really a big question when it comes to these pieces of legislation. So let's continue. Let's let Rep. Titone finish up.
Trans kid and you went someplace and said you can't be trans or LGBT for any reason, why? What does that have an effect? That's a negative thing that you're telling a kid they can't be who they are. And if
So in a sense, I kind of agree, right? Like think about it from a kid's perspective. You're a kid, you're pulled out of your home, and maybe you are LGBT and you're trans or you're just regular LGB, like it seems like you're either part of that group or part of the other one. You're just like your T or the rest. But whatever the case is, you identify in a particular way, and I can sympathize, right? If you're a kid and you get like you're already pulled out of your home, and then you're put into a home, and then they're telling you, nope, you can't be that way. That's not who you are. I think that would be pretty jarring for a child. However, the problem here is that actually happening, and isn't it happening on a large scale that requires being addressed? That's the big issue. That's the question we should always be asking when we're evaluating a bill. How big of a problem is this actually? That's the first question we ask. Because if it is a big problem, then we know, okay, we need to address this. But if it's not a big problem, then we don't need to address it. Or maybe a smaller organization is better suited for it, right? And then once we determine if something is actually happening, then we have to determine whether or not legislation is the best course of action or if something else is a better course of action. And then if we determine that legislation is in fact the best course of action, then we have to determine what kind of legislation, what does that look like, and what will the results be, how will we judge it, so on and so forth. Okay. All right. I promise I'll quit interrupting.
the parents of that kid know that they are LGBT or trans, then you're going against that. We need to make sure we're giving them the ability to be themselves and not tell them who they're not. You can't tell somebody who they're not. You have to give them a place where they could be themselves.
We don't have to.
30% of children and youth in foster care identify as LGBTQ+. And these children have an additional layer of trauma that accompanies being rejected or mistreated because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. This is a problem for these kids to begin with.
Okay. So Representative Titone repeats this 30%, right? Like 30% of these kids, and that's an additional layer of trauma. Now, I'm not sure where the information, that they are coming up with this. I don't know what source they did, but I did some of my own digging here. So let's take a look and let's see what else we have. We've got some news articles. We've got the bill review itself. So let's take a look at the bill. And we're just going to kind of skim through it and get a sense for what this bill is actually talking about, right? So let's take a look at the bill. Then let's take some news articles, and then let's address that 30% because there's something very curious going on there. All right. So there we go. There it is. There's the bill. And all right. So House Bill 24 1017. So we scroll down here. Concerning a Bill of Rights for Youth in Foster Care. And this bill establishes a statutory Bill of Rights for children and youth in foster care in Colorado, including youth participating in the foster youth in transition program, but excluding youth detained by or committed to the care and physical custody of the Division of Youth Services. The Office of the Children's Representative shall develop a written notice of the rights, and a county department of human or social services shall provide each youth who is 5 years of age or older with the written notice in the youth's primary language at the time of the youth's initial placement in foster care, at each placement change, and at least annually. So they're going to inform kids and say, like, all right, here are your rights. Okay, cool. Like, doesn't sound bad. Now, I don't remember which bill review that I did, but I was talking about the Bill of Rights that seems to be super popular for everything. Like everybody's talking, like I've seen people like, you've got a restaurant Bill of Rights. Like okay, we need to stop this, folks. Like, this is getting absurd. Every little element of our society does not need its own unique Bill of Rights. That's just absurd. And heck, we can't even agree on the actual Bill of Rights. I mean, people argue all the time about the Second Amendment and, in particular, and then a little bit on the First Amendment. Not a whole lot of arguments on the other ones, but, like we don't entirely agree on our original Bill of Rights. So let's go down. Let's see what we got here. So we go down and let's see, I should have kept my numbers, my page number. So I apologize. But oh yeah, so let's take a look here. So where are we going here? Okay, so we've got some information here. So it says, let's go back up. It says rights of children and youth in foster care, written notice reporting legislative. The General Assembly finds and declares. So that's the beginning of this. So we're declaring some information. Okay, cool. Children and youth in foster care are temporarily or permanently separated from their parents and are the responsibility of the state of Colorado. No big issue there. That's the system that we have currently in place. These children and youth are in a unique situation that requires special safeguards, making it vital to establish rights for children and youth in foster care. So I would agree that they are in a unique situation. You are literally pulling a child out of the home, saying whatever is going on in this home is not good for you, to the point that we need to withdraw you and put you into a different home. So that is clearly a unique situation. Now, whether or not they need rights for children, I don't know, because the question is, what have you been doing all this time? Right? Like, you're telling me in 2024 that this is a unique situation for which it's vital to establish rights for children and youth in foster. Like, how long have you been doing this, state of Colorado? Right? Like, that's great. In fact, let me pull that up really quickly, because let's go to this. Yeah, let's go to this one here, and then we're gonna pull it up, and let's see if I can't. Why are you not cooperating here with me? Oh, I think I see what's going on. Okay, that's fine. We'll do that. Okay, so let's cut on over to this real quick. So this is Colorado General Assembly website. Okay. And so this is, I did a bill search, and you can see where I just typed in the word foster, right? And I left it alone. So I'm gonna scroll down here. Okay. Displaying 1 to 25 of 283 results. We're not going to go through all of them, but look, foster care prevention services, concerning foster care prevention services to align current standards with the Federal Family First Prevention Services Act, governor signed. All right. And this was in, you can see to the right, 2019. Foster children, driving licenses, governor signed. Foster Care Success Act, concerning measures to improve the educational attainment of students in out of home placement, governor signed. Kinship foster home care homes, concerning the increasing support for kinship foster care homes. Okay. This one is still, it's still in process. Foster Parent Bill of Rights, governor signed. Support foster families, license plate, governor signed. Foster Youth in Transition Program, governor signed. This is a different, but same concept here. Foster Parents Bill of Rights. Student Services Coordination, governor signed. Driver's license for foster children, governor signed. Fostering Success Voucher Program, governor signed. Driving instruction for foster children, on the table, right? Let's see, Foster Youth Sibling Bill of Rights, governor signed. Like just on and on and on. There is bill after bill after bill that has been signed to support foster kids. So my question is, like, why at this point are we still talking about that this is a unique situation that requires rights for children and special safeguards? How is it that the government of Colorado hasn't gotten its act together? Right? And some of those bills were back in 2019, and I think if you do your research enough, you'll find that I think it was in the legislature. I can't remember where it was, but like some of these bills go back to like the early 20 teens, right? Like 2011 or something like that. Like some of these bills are like a decade old. Like, you've been doing this forever. And you're just now establishing this idea that it's vital to establish rights for children. Like, what have you been doing? And so when people say, well, DL, how come you don't trust government? This is why. Because government in 2024 is telling me, like, oh, well, we've got to establish this because, you know, it is very critical and super duper important. Okay, well, yeah, it has been. It didn't just start being super duper important, Colorado. All right, so what's going on here? Let's see. Approximately 3,600 children or youth are currently in out-of-home foster placements in Colorado. So in Colorado, they're saying 3,600, so 3,600 kids. Okay, they need to pass this bill because they can't figure out how to ensure that 3,600 kids are having whatever rights they deem protected. Let's see. Children and youth in foster care, both in Colorado and nationwide, tend to have poorer outcomes than other children and youth, including 1/3 of children or youth in foster care in Colorado who age out of foster care become homeless within 3 years. Now, these representatives, this news story is talking about 30% of foster kids are LGBT or LGBTQ plus whatever, and then we also see 1/3 of children age out and then they're homeless within 3 years. But what are they doing? Like we're focusing on the pronouns and you know and all this stuff, and we'll get to that. Let's see. Children and youth in foster care in Colorado change schools on average 3.5 times per year. Okay. Approximately 30% of youth in foster care graduate from high school compared to 82% of the general student. So that's a nice way of saying 70% of foster care kids do not graduate high school. So we've got Bill, we've got representatives, we've got the media talking about 30% are LGBTQ, but they're not talking about 70% aren't graduating from high school, right? Like that's when maybe that's for 2025. I don't know. In Colorado, youth in foster care have lower graduation rates than youth experiencing homelessness. Okay. Nationwide, more than half of children and youth in foster care receive a psychiatric or mental health diagnosis compared to 16 and teen. And I'm trying to read this, and this is too early to be reading this kind of language. 16 and 61/100% of income eligible children. Okay. So let's just go with the first part. More than half of children and youth receive psychiatric or mental, half of them, half receive mental health care. And again, all the media seems to be focusing on the fact that there are 30% who might get placed with a conservative family. Okay. So down here, now we get into some of this data here. 30% of children and youth in foster care nationwide identify as LGBTQ plus. And these children and youth have an additional layer of trauma that accompanies being rejected or mistreated because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Okay. So 30% nationwide identify LGBTQ plus. Okay. I want you to remember that 30% nationwide. Research shows that children and youth in foster who identify as LGBTQ plus are more than twice as likely to report being treated poorly by the foster care system. That might actually be true. I don't know, because I've heard a lot of bad things just in general about the foster care system. I mean, how often have we seen a story over the years, foster family abusing, like horrible people abusing, and it's god awful. I can't imagine taking a child from one home that might have been abusive, right? Which tends to be the case, and then putting him in a foster home where they get abused again. Like, that's insane. And I feel like that should be one of our top priorities. We are literally taking you out of a home and saying, we're going to provide you some place where you won't be abused. And then we fail repeatedly, right? And I don't know the data on that. But I feel like that's a pretty important thing, right? There are just plenty of horror stories about fostering, about kids in the foster system. There are plenty of good stories too. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to, there are good stories. Okay, so 30%. All right. Well, let's take a look at that. Let's go back to some news articles here, and let's see what we come up with here. And for whatever reason, this is being a bit of a pain. Give me just a second as I oh there no there it goes. Perfect. We got it back. All right. Bingo. All right, so there we are. So here's this article, and this was published February 8th, 2024. Colorado foster kids want their own Bill of Rights. So why are lawmakers fighting about pronouns? Now, this is a news article from the Colorado Sun. I don't know how big and important the Colorado Sun is, but their headline is, why are lawmakers fighting about pronouns? Now remember, 30% of like kids are homeless. 30% kids that age out end up being homeless in 3 years. 70% don't graduate high school, right? Like you have all these other problems, and the media wants to talk about pronouns. And the video at the very top of the show, where or kind of at the beginning of the show, where the gentleman was like, well, they might get placed in a conservative home and who doesn't share their particular values or wants to make them go to church, and they don't want to go to church, and they shouldn't have to go to church if they don't want to go to church, right? That's what we're worried about. We're not worried about, the fact that they don't graduate. We're not worried about the fact that half of them have mental health issues. We're worried about Republicans arguing about pronouns. So the proposed Bill of Rights says foster kids are entitled to food, hygiene, and playing sports. If the government is going to be in charge, I don't necessarily have an issue with this, right? Like food, hygiene, playing sports. I would have thought that was a given. I would think that part of the requirements that you don't have to write into law for being able to participate in a foster care program is that you would like put them in, give them help give them things to keep clean, give them food, and allow them to interact with society. But apparently we need to put that into a bill. But it's the part about gender identity that has GOP lawmakers opposed. All right. One former foster child told Colorado lawmakers she was forbidden from cooking breakfast because the noise would disturb her foster mother. I don't know the story. This is an anecdote. And, you get enough anecdotes, you might have some data. I don't really know about this. I'm not going to focus on it. Another said she was forced to take birth control. Okay. That one's a problem, I think. But again, these are single stories. A city councilwoman tearfully described how years ago, a foster child, she took beatings to protect her little sister. This is written in 2024, and a councilwoman described something that happened years ago. So they didn't resolve that years ago. Like now we're like, okay, we need this legislation because something that happened years ago. Like, how was that not taken care of? And a girl who was in high school, who was a high school soccer star, was no longer allowed to play after she was placed in foster care and had to move to a new town. Again, I don't have the details of these stories, so I can't validate any of these. They're asking the Colorado legislature to pass a quote Bill of Rights for foster youth, a formalized list that every foster child 5 and older would receive when they are placed in care. The rights include not being locked in a room, having access to the internet, and having appropriate luggage instead of a trash bag to carry clothes. Okay, again, a foster care system that has existed for probably longer than I've been alive. And you just now are working on preventing them from being locked in a room. What are you doing? But it's about 12 lines in the 15-page legislation that have caused hours of debate in committee hearing and on the House floor. Here's what they say. Foster children and teens will have the right to freedom from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Now, I don't know what it means by discrimination. Does that mean like if somebody wants to be a foster child parent, they can say, I don't want 30%, allegedly 30% of the kids, just give me all the heterosexual ones, all the ones that are not LGBTQ plus. I don't know. They will have the right to be referred to by their preferred name and pronoun. Does that strike you as a bit weird? Because half, again, have mental health problems. They're receiving mental health. 30% end up homeless when they age out after 3 years. or within 3 years. 70% do not graduate, but we need to make sure that they are being referred to by their preferred name and pronouns. That's what's important. They will have the right to attend or refuse to attend religious services and activities. That's interesting. So let me put it this way. Imagine that I adopt a child. My wife and I adopt a child. Okay. In this house, it's me, my wife, my 5-year-old son, and my mother-in-law. She's 80. On Sunday mornings, we go to church. My wife and her mom are Catholic. I'm just a plain old boring heathen. We all attend church on Sunday mornings. If we adopted, like, say, a 7-year-old and they decided, I don't want to go to church, what are we supposed to do with them? Like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, they have the right to refuse to attend a religion. If all the family is going, then at what age would this kid who's pulled out of their home be permitted to sit at home while the rest of the family attends services? Right? Or what if they want to attend a particular service and the family's like, look, we don't believe that way. And, we go over here at this time. And the child's like, well, I want to go to this one. Then does one of the family members have to go with them? Just drop them off? Like, how does it, like, I don't, like, it's not clear how this works. When you get placed with a family, my assumption is that you will participate in that family's affairs, period. You'll eat dinner at 6 o'clock if that's when they eat. You'll go to church if they go to church, right? Maybe not everything. Like, if the family sits down to watch movie night, I don't know. I maybe, but the point here is it seems to be micromanaging a family when they can't seem to manage some of these other statistics, which presumably are true. Again, all stats are on the table. All right. The 4 Republicans in the House Health and Human Services Committee wouldn't support the bill because of those words, though they were outnumbered 9-4. Debate in the House, where the bill is still awaiting a vote, went on for hours as GOP lawmakers warned that Colorado could lose hundreds of Christian foster parents if the legislature passed the Bill of Rights as written. Here we go again. About 30% of youth, foster youth in Colorado, identify as LGBTQ. An estimated 50% or more of foster homes are religious. Sounds like there's a problem. And in my opinion, number one, you want as many families involved. Now, I just talked to you yesterday about the problem with mentoring. Mentoring in the organization that I went to mentor with, they would match up a man with a boy and a woman with a girl. And they were like, look, we're struggling to get enough men. And it appears, as it says here, Colorado already has a shortage of foster homes with 3,730 children in foster care and only 2,500 certified homes, said Representative Brandy Bradley, a Littleton Republican. So you already have a shortage, and you're going to make it more difficult so that you can address what some kid wants to be called by. And why? Are you pulling them out of their families because their mom and dad don't want to call them he or she when like they're born male and they're like, but I'm a she, and mom and dad says, nope, you're a he. And then Colorado's like, oh, is that the case? Well, we're going to pull you out and put you in this other home for which we don't have enough of. And we're going to now pass a law that requires people to say these things at risk of losing families and creating an even more shortage. Are you understanding why I really don't like government so much? Because they keep getting in there and just doing things and making the problem worse. And they don't even seem to be addressing the already existing problems. So now let's take a look at some of this information. I want to get to this 30% because I find it interesting. So over here on the Hill, and this is a slight deviation, but I'm just going to show you. New rule designed to protect LGBTQ foster children draws GOP opposition. This was in January of this year. A new rule requiring child welfare agencies to place LGBTQ children in environments free of hostility, mistreatment, or abuse based on the child's sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression is drawing opposition from Republicans. The proposed rule, issued in September by the Department of Health and Human Services, would require caregivers to undergo cultural competency training to ensure LGBTQ youth are placed in homes where their identities are affirmed. Okay. So again, We're not worried about their graduation rates. We're not trying to fix it that. We're not putting all hands on deck for that. We're not dealing with the mental health issue. We're not dealing with the fact that they end up being homeless. We just want to make sure that if a child is in a home and they want to be referred to as a she or as a he, that family, by golly, you're going to do it. Okay. Now, if the 30% holds true, maybe they have a point, right? Maybe. So let's go down. Let's see here. Studies have shown that LGBTQ plus or LGBTQ. See, everybody does this always different. Like stick to something. Anyway, young people are overrepresented in the child welfare system. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual children are more than twice as likely to experience foster care placement compared with their heterosexual peers. We saw that in the bill that we just read. A 2019 study found, and roughly, so a 2019 study found that they're more than twice as likely. Okay, cool. And then roughly 30% of foster youth identify as LGBTQ, according to the Children's Bureau, the federal agency responsible for overseeing the child welfare system in the United States. About 5% of foster youth identify as transgender. Okay, so we've narrowed it down. So we've got 30% identify as LGBTQ, like the whole range, and then 5% identify as transgender. So remember the video of Representative Tatone, who's like, this motivated me to get involved because they were transgender. And so therefore, because 5% of the foster youth are transgender, they decide that, oh, yep, you know what? I should go be a foster parent. Not, I want to care about the other 95%, just the 5%, right? And again, we don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to assume that one is. I didn't really look into this, but I did look into the 30%. So let's continue on. Let's see, where do we want to go here? Yeah, let's go over here. I think I got these right in order. All right, so CBX, Children's Bureau Express, right? Supporting and affirming LGBTQ plus children, youth, and families. August of 2022. LGBTQ plus children and youth. Let me make that a little bigger here. Particularly transgender youth are overrepresented in foster care. Studies indicate that about 30% of youth in foster care identifies LGBTQ plus, compared with 11% of youth not in foster care, and that approximately 5% of youth in care identify as transgender, compared with 1% of youth not in foster care. Okay, awesome. So what is this link we've got? This link here, overrepresented, goes to youth.gov. Okay, so let's see, where's my youth.gov here? Nope, that's not it. There it is, youth.gov. So we're going to put this up on the screen here. All right, so youth.gov, we're they say follow the money. We're trying to follow the research. What we're trying to do today. It's a little on the dry side because I'm showing all these websites, but I'm showing, and I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can follow it through yourself. Okay, LGBTQ plus youth enter the child welfare system for reasons like those of other children and in youth. That is, their birth families cannot provide a safe and stable and nurturing home. And so we go down here. LGBTQ plus are overrepresented in child welfare systems, even though they are likely to be underreported because they risk harassment and abuse if their LGBTQ plus identity is disclosed. So that's a very interesting point there. So they're saying it's underreported because they're too afraid to tell people. So remember that when somebody's like, oh, all these families are abusing it. Well, you don't know, because clearly the kids aren't telling people. So we don't know if that was the actual reason that they were pulled, because you can't say, well, these kids that are underreported because they're not telling us, but we know they're trans kids or LGBTQ kids that are being mistreated in their home. That's why we got to address like that. That's not how it works. You can't assume that there's something when they haven't told you there's something, right? All right. So anyway, studies have found that about 30% of youth in foster care identify as LGBTQ plus, and 5% is transgender. See, same numbers repeatedly, in comparison to 11% and 1% of youth not in foster care. So now we have a link. We're getting somewhere, right? So let's see this. This link goes down to, so here, and it says, it's number 1. It says BAMS, Wilson, and Russell, right? 2019. Okay, so now we have a study that we can reference. Let's go to one more news article. I promise you we're going to get there. Colorado lawmakers hope to curb discrimination for LGBTQ youth in the foster care system. This was in 2021. Okay, from Colorado Newsline, right? Yeah, Colorado Newsline. Where are we here? Lost my spot here. I should have highlighted it or something. Oh, here we go. A 2019 study in California found that over 30% of youth in foster care identify as LGBTQ and 5% as transgender compared to 11%, 1%. So we're repeating the same numbers. We're following this. We're following the numbers, not money today, but we're following the numbers so that we can identify the source of this information. So this leads us to pediatrics website. That's interesting. So let's go to, so this is the link. This is the page that it goes to. LGBTQ youth in unstable housing and foster care, March 1st, 2019. Scroll down here. Okay. Methods right here. This is where it gets interesting. A total of 89,528, 2000. Well, I'm sorry, I'm reading it. They got that weird space in between the 5 and the 2. A total of 218 students, 10 to 18 years, completed the cross-sectional California Healthy Kids Survey from 2013 to 2015. Did you just catch that? Cross-sectional California Healthy Kids Survey. California. Surveys were administered in 2,600. Let me make this a little bigger. Surveys were administered in 2,641 middle and high school schools throughout California. Primary outcome measures included school functioning, so on and so forth. California. Everybody is reporting 30% of youth in this child system, in the foster system, are identified as LGBTQ based on a study that identified this 30% in California. So does that hold true in a place like Nevada or Oregon, Florida, Indiana? It's hard to say, but they're repeating it like it's nationwide, right? Colorado, in their legislation, they are saying 30% of LGBTQ plus, 30% of kids in the foster care identify as LGBTQ. When we dig in, we find the source is a 2019 article, 2019 study that surveyed children in school in California between the years of 2013 and 2015. Now, the years are a little bit less, I don't find them quite as important because I would assume that most of those kids probably still identify that way, but they might not, depending on how they identify. There are kids that are like, you know what, maybe I'm this, and then turn out maybe they're not, right? And that's fine. I don't know what that number is, but we'll go ahead and disregard the years, right? I assume they're still that way. I don't know, that way. I mean, sounds pretty bad. What I mean to say is I assume they still identify as they did when they took the survey, right? But again, 30% nationwide. Now, that's not the only place that we get in this, right? So we come over here, the Williams Institute. This is a popular one, right? LGBTQ youth in unstable housing and foster care, March 2019, using data from California Healthy Kids Survey. This study assesses whether LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in unstable housing and foster care and examines disparities in school functioning, substance use, and mental health. It appeared in Pediatrics in March 2019. We look over here to the right and we see the same authors. BAMS, I assume that's how you say it, Wilson and Russell. Right. So the same single study keeps being reported by everyone. And then we go over here, and this is the Human Rights Campaign, and they have a little bit to say about this. LGBTQ youth in the foster care system. We scroll down here, and where is it here? Where is it? LGBT, under the heading, LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in foster care. nearly 400,000 children and youth in foster care in the United States. These youth have been removed from their homes due to abuse or neglect, right? And then we come down here a little bit. A recent study in Los Angeles conducted by the Williams Institute found that nearly 1 out of 5 LA-based foster youth are LGBTQ, and the percentage of youth in foster care who are LGBTQ is between 1.5 and 2 times that of youth living outside. So LA, they determined it was 1 out of 5, 20%. Okay. So we've got 20%, we've got 30%, and all the data seems to be coming from California. And then everybody's extrapolating and saying, well, if it's true in California, then it must be true in Colorado, which is where we're having this debate, right? This is the Bill of Rights for foster youth, concerning a Bill of Rights for foster youth in for youth in foster care. And so let's see, is there anything? No, there's nothing I need to read here. So Colorado didn't do their own research. They're not telling you 30% of our kids that we have identified are LGBTQ. And so therefore, this is necessary to pass this. We have to pass this legislation because 30% in Colorado, as we have researched and identify as LGBTQ. And it is critical that they get this affirmation because as we've studied and identified, they're not, and it's making a problem worse. That's not what they're telling you. They're not saying that. And that's when we should consider legislation. We should not consider legislation when another state identifies what they determine to be a particular percentage of something happening in their state and then extrapolating it to every other state. This bill should die, literally, like seriously. And they should deal with other problems that I presume, again, all stats are on the table. Maybe half of them aren't receiving mental health care, right? I've said that, a few minutes ago, that half of them aren't receiving health care. Half of them are receiving health care. 70% don't graduate. 30% end up homeless. Those may be untrue as well. I don't know. But if we're just going to base it on numbers, it sounds like they've got some existing problems to deal with, and they're not. They're adding more problems to try and deal with. So this bill, kill it. Let it go. All right. I think my producer is calling for me, so I'm going to have to go and we've covered everything anyway. So that's what I've got. Let's look at some, see if I can find any comments that I need to address. It looks like some comments here that are, I agree. I think this is very important to always say no for perfect solutions. There is a quote that I love. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. Everything is a trade-off. And when you're focusing on the pronouns, you're not focusing on something else because you're literally taking your attention and devoting it there, which means you don't have attention elsewhere. So I think what people in Colorado need to do, they need to watch my podcast. They need to go and research it for themselves. Should only take them a couple of hours. And they should identify whether or not they believe that whether or not they agree with me that this bill is being pushed on the basis of information that is clearly dubious, that may not represent their own state. You should not be passing bills in your state based on a study that was conducted in another state. You should have multiple studies. Like if they were citing like 4 or 5 studies from different states and they all said the same thing, then yeah, maybe you have a point there. But when it's only California and a lot of people are skeptical about things and the people in California anyway, because they tend to be more liberal, right? It's unclear whether that actually is applicable to other states. And you shouldn't pass legislation on that basis. And for God's sakes, get it together, Colorado. Figure it. I mean, I'm sure that Florida is probably not doing so great if I dug into their foster care system. But right now, we don't have any bills regarding that. We got other trash bills I got to deal with. Anyway, that's my show today, folks. I hope you found it informative and inspiring. I want you to catch me every Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern-ish. I know I was late today, sorry, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again, Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth. We look across the vastness of tyranny that is in this United States, and we bring news to you of what the LP is up to in the various states and cities. And then you can be inspired to do some of those things and feel good knowing that, hey, the third party, Libertarian Party, the third largest party in the United States, is alive and well and active. I want you to make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, leave me a comment and let me know how I'm doing. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. I'll catch you next time.